Welcome back to Unspoken Emotions, the podcast where we speak the truths most people keep buried. I'm your host, Rachel, and today's episode is one of those conversations that will stay with you long after it ends. This story is sensitive, it's heavy, and it's human. Today I'm joined by Lee, a mother, a business owner, and a woman whose life completely changed at the age of 48 following a tragic road traffic accident. A moment of mistaken judgment cost someone their life, led to a court trial, a prison sentence, and a heartbreaking journey through guilt, separation, and personal transformation. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honour the woman who tragically lost her life in that accident. A daughter, a sister, and someone whose family still feels the pain of that loss every day. This episode holds space for her memory and for those left behind. Lee's story isn't about excusing what happened, it's about facing what happened and exploring how one mistake made in a split second can ripple through so many lives, including your own. This episode may especially resonate with anyone who's ever made a life-altering mistake, carried guilt, navigated shame, or fought to find themselves again after falling apart. If you've ever felt unworthy of redemption or struggled to forgive yourself, this is a story you need to hear. Lee, welcome. Thank you for being here with such courage.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello and welcome. Okay, Lee, let's start by going back to a life before everything changed. You were a mum, running your own early years business, living what many would see as fairly ordinary but full life. Can you paint us a picture of what your world looked like before that day, please?
My world was all about my children and my family. We lived in a sleepy village. It was about getting the children to school, getting off to work, running a business. It was about getting the children to swimming. It was about they were part of cubs and brownies, and so it was about the children. It was all about getting ready for the children being teenagers, even at that age. Just being with them. And having fun. We used to camp a lot. We had a camper van, holidays, good friends, away with friends, good friends in the village. It's not where I grew up. We moved there really when my daughter was born. That was my life. And a busy life with the business, getting the business up and running, which I took on when my daughter was 7 months old, I think. Yeah. So actually, a business so that I could be there for my children and work, not in the school holidays.
Yeah. Family life, just balancing family life with obviously your own business, which is a major challenge in itself, especially with a young baby in tow. But yeah, just an ordinary, everyday, fulfilled life, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then came the day that changed everything. I know it's not going to be easy to revisit, but can you share with us what happened that day on the drive home, please?
So I'd been away for the weekend with my 3 best friends. We'd been to Longleat Centre Parks, and we'd had a lovely weekend catching up. I was training at the time for my first half marathon, so there was lots of running. My best friend's very good at running. Mucking around in the swimming pools at a race there, just having, a really good weekend with them. And then they were going home on the Monday evening, on the Monday day, I was going home on the Sunday evening because I had one of my team was working somewhere that I needed to be the following day. So the plan was that I was going to leave on the Sunday evening, which I did. So 9 o'clock that evening, I'm being in the car park, and I rang my husband to say that I'd be on my way home. I'll be there in about 40 minutes. I lived about 40 minutes away. And actually, normally I would have probably rang him on the way home on my hands-free, but I was really looking forward to a radio program. I think it was it was Desert Island Discs or something like that. Anyway, I wanted to watch it. I was looking forward to listening to it. Said I was going to be home in 40 minutes, left the car park, followed a car. I think for majority of the journey, there was lots of roundabouts, and And then I was behind some cars. It's dark. It's nighttime. It's not a a busy journey, busy roads. And I felt the traffic slow down, so I decided to make a takeover maneuver. Um, um, on the journey, this is 3 miles now. I've only left Longleat 3 miles, and I didn't know at the time, but in that 3 miles, the road had changed 9 times between two lanes being in one direction and one lane being the other direction. And I still don't know why. I thought that I was on a part of the road where two lanes were going in my direction. And I decided, because the vehicles had slowed down, that I was going to, take over, which I did, not in any rush, did my maneuver, saw a vehicle coming towards me, didn't have any fear, didn't think that anything was wrong. I just assumed that this vehicle was on their side of the road. And then, literally at the moment of impact, it was, I don't think, I didn't even say anything. We crashed. No, before we crashed, I thought I went to the right. I didn't steer to the left because the car that I was overtaking was still on my left. So I I went to the right because I think that I believed this road, that I could get over to the right because this person must be on my side of the road. Does that make sense? So anyway, this was the same at the same moment. The other car did the same. We both veered off in the same direction, and we hit. And it was just so slow and so quiet and so dark. And then I crawled out of the car, and I lay on the verge. As soon as I got out of the car, I realised that the road was not what I thought the road was. I knew that I kept calling it a dual carriageway. I knew it wasn't a dual carriageway. I still don't know what the road is called, with the two in one way and one in the other way. But I knew that I had completely and utterly misread the road. It was dark. It was January. It was dark and it was cold, and I was laying on the grass looking up, and I could hear some people behind me, which must have turned up quite quickly, at the other car, and I could hear them trying to get in the car, and I knew that something was wrong. I knew that the people were getting distressed. I knew that it wasn't good. I think I probably knew straight away that, the person in the car wasn't answering. And then somebody turned up, which turned out to be a lovely lady, and she was a nurse, not on duty. And I didn't want anyone helping me. I wanted them going to this other car. I just kept telling everyone it was my fault. I just knew. I just kept saying I misread the road. And there's a piece of you, like if you're in an accident. I've been driving for 35 years, and never and driven a lot and never had an accident. So, you hear don't admit to things, but it was completely and utterly my fault. There was nobody else's fault. So anyway, lots of things, lots of people, they were getting things out of my car to keep me warm, and covering me. And then I was told that the person in the car had died. And I just knew then, the world, just everything had changed. I'd never harmed anyone in my life. And at that moment, I had just done the worst thing ever. So I just laid there. I didn't cry, actually. I didn't cry. I didn't cry. And then I just wanted my husband. And I wanted them to ring my husband and tell him I was okay. And they rang my husband. They couldn't say that I was okay. They said I was going to the hospital. So my husband got a phone call to say that his wife was in an accident, but they couldn't say if I was okay or not and to meet me at the hospital. They didn't know this. Then I got put into the ambulance. I do remember my coat was feathers everywhere and there was oil from the car. So everybody that was coming and speaking to me was covered in feathers and oil. I remember that. They got me in the ambulance. I was hurting. I knew I was fine. I was just hurting all over. And then I got took off to the hospital and everyone was so nice to me and so kind. And I just knew what time was just the worst thing ever. I didn't know who this person was. I don't think I even knew anything about this person at the time. I don't think I was told. And then I went to hospital and Matthew was there. And we just held each other's hands and cried. He didn't know anything at that point. I don't think he knew anything. And I just said that I don't know if I used the words I've killed someone. That sounds so harsh. I just said somebody's died. I don't know what I said. We didn't say a lot. And I had x-rays and then I was put home in a taxi and I got home. My dad was at home. So my mum and dad lived about an hour and 45 minutes away, and my dad had turned up because I think when my husband got the phone call, he kind of ran out into the streets because he had to find someone to look after the children and knocked on a random neighbour who was actually a policeman, a friend of ours. He looked after the children. Matt came down. Then my dad exchanged at some point. Anyway, I came home and I remember getting into bed and my then 6-year-old son got out of bed and we just told him that Mummy, I don't know what we told him. We didn't tell them. We told them, they knew I was in an accident. You know, until I went away, they knew I was in an accident, but they didn't know the ins and outs of it all. So I went to bed. I slept surprisingly well. I had lots of medicine that the hospital gave me, and I think that I was just out for the count until the next day. And the days, the weeks, are just sadness. I don't think I'd ever been sad in my whole life. I genuinely don't think I had ever felt sadness. And it just felt sadness, like I couldn't make it right. I couldn't change it. I couldn't change what I'd done. It was just sadness. And I felt so submissive, like I felt so. I had a police officer come the day after or 2 days after, and I thought that was my opportunity to tell them everything, which it was my opportunity, but it was clear that the family weren't being told, and I was the only person on the night. I knew what had happened. I knew that this other person, I won't say her name, but she was a lady. I do say her name, but I'm not going to say her name here. Her family didn't know what had happened, and I wanted I was begging the police officer to let them know that it wasn't her fault, that it was my fault. She didn't do anything wrong, that it was, all me. And it was kind of, I didn't get the process. I didn't understand. I didn't even understand that this police officer, wasn't, he was part of the other side, if there's sides. And it was only actually when I saw him eventually in court sitting with the family that I realised that Oh, no. He interviewed me. No, he was the person who interviewed me in the police station a week or 2 weeks later. But I got to say everything that happened. I was very clear on what happened. I knew what had happened. I wasn't, I remembered everything. I wasn't probably like I'm speaking now, like I knew there was a car on my left. I knew that's the why I didn't go left, but I wasn't saying there was a car on my left. I was saying I felt there was a car on my left, because actually in those split seconds of when you're in an accident like that, you're not thinking clearly, are you? You're doing everything through feeling. And actually driving you do through feeling. I've been, like I say, I've been driving for so many years that you do things because unconsciously. So everything was unconscious. The reason I didn't go left, the reason I went right, it wasn't conscious. It was just what I did in that moment. So yeah, so that's what happened that night, and that's what happened the next day, or the day after, when the police officer arrived.
Wow, gosh, that was really emotional to listen to that. I mean, that must have been a surreal and devastating moment. Realizing the weight of what had happened, the loss of a life, the shock. How did you even begin to process what had just happened?
I I don't think I did. Well, it was a long time because we were going into COVID at the time, and the courts. I mean, I wasn't sentenced. I think it was 18 months. It was kind of 18 months afterwards. So that 18 months was just this big cloud of not knowing what was going to happen, and I use the word submissive. I didn't want to fight it. Well, there was nothing to fight, but I didn't want to stick up for myself. I didn't want to, like, if there was so I went to the police for the police interview, and I met the solicitor that I got given, a free solicitor at the beginning, somebody that had been recommended, and all I wanted was a friend. All I wanted was a nice person. Um, and when we did a brief interview beforehand, I told her my story, and I think she said to me, just say it as it was. Usually I tell my clients to not say things. She said, just say everything. Um, and in the interview, I was told that there was a witness, which was not the vehicle in front of me, the vehicle in front of that had witnessed what was happening in their wing mirror. And he had said that I was on the wrong side of the road for 30 seconds. And during the interview, because they played it all during the court as well, I was just like, gosh, was I? 30 seconds is a really long time. And I was in the interview going, can I count 30 seconds? And I was literally going, 1, 2, 3, and counting it, going. And I kind of said, I think that's a really long time, because I knew I hadn't passed that car. And I knew, and then later on, because I was still driving afterwards for 18 months, and I would often, on a dual carriageway or where I could overtake, I would go up to the car and I would pull out and I would count, and I knew it was only like 10 seconds, maybe 20, but because this person had said 30 seconds, I never questioned it. I didn't want to question it. Like, this person had seen it. I didn't I just didn't want to. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to. I didn't want to fight it. I just thought, well, that's what happened. Somebody saw that. That's the way it must be. Even though I did all this silly, not silly, but this counting afterwards. So submissive and not
Yeah.
wanting to fight it. And my husband was amazing. Like, he was just my absolute rock. Like, I just couldn't cope with. I mean, going to solicitors and barristers, and I just wanted to put my head under the quilt most of the time, really. And I had so many friends and family and so many people coming out, and I've got people that, work within the law. I've got, friends and, everyone giving us advice. But, my husband he just took it all, he did all the figuring out everything. I got on with life, other parts of it, like my team knew nothing. They knew I'd had an accident, but that, nobody knew the severity of it. So it was like this double life that I was leading. And then even when we went into COVID, I could cope with focusing on business and, and life at home, like we protected the children, but every night I didn't believe that I would ever go away. I'd never been away for the children. My youngest wouldn't ever leave my side. I'd put them to bed, but you're always really conscious that, imagining that you might be taken away from them. But I couldn't, like you can't imagine things that you've never been in that, like I couldn't imagine not being there for my children.
Yeah.
So I think I spent 18 months of getting on with the stuff that I could get on with. The real stuff that was going on, my husband was dealing with it, and I was just there, not really there. So I don't think I processed it until I actually went away to prison. I think that's when that was that's when I was being punished and I needed to be punished, and I think that's when I started to process it all.
I mean, you weren't reckless, you weren't speeding. It was a misjudgment, one that can happen to anyone. But when something so final happens, guilt doesn't care about intent, does it? I mean, the guilty feeling that you had, even though you didn't intend that to happen, what was that like?
Say that question again to me again. Sorry.
So sorry, just saying that you weren't reckless and you weren't speeding. It was a misjudgment, one that could happen to any one of us at any time. But when something like this, that's so final, happens, guilt really doesn't care about intent, and whether you intended to, for this accident to happen. But how did you cope with that guilt, even though you knew, yes, it was your fault, but it was a misjudgment?
I don't think any of that mattered. It matters, later on when you're in court. For me, I think I said, like, I've never harmed anyone. I've never hurt anyone. I'm a kind person. My whole being is about helping. My whole being is always about motivating people and helping people and being there for people. And, I never dreamed that I would ever be in this situation. Like I think when you drive a car, you do think about having an accident, that you might be in an accident, you've got to be careful, but I don't think you ever think that you could be in an accident that bad that you could cause that. I I don't think that's ever been in my thought, and forget the going to prison. The guilt is I took away a life. That is like that's massive. That's just, I mean, I can't even now. I can't even, it just doesn't, feel right. I can't, it just, that's like the worst thing anybody could do. And it doesn't matter that it was an accident. It doesn't matter, that I wasn't speeding or texting or all those things, you know, there isn't anything, that I could stop doing to not do it again. Like if I drove again, and originally I thought I would never drive, but actually I do want to drive. I need to get my children still to places, like everything is now on the shoulders of my husband and my family. We moved so that there was support around us, because I will drive again, but there isn't anything that I can stop doing for it not to happen again. That's a really scary
Mm.
thought. And I don't know if I'm going off on tangent now. So on the night, I would normally phone my husband, on Bluetooth, all legal. We all do
Yeah.
it. My sentence, if I had been on that phone, because then on hands-free Bluetooth, would have doubled, tripled. It would have been a minimum of 6 years, even though that wouldn't have been the cause of it.
Hmm.
I mean, it might, but it happened without that cause. So just that little thing, and also how everybody reacted to me, and how there was all that guilt, but people reacted differently to me, I believe, than if I had have even been on the phone. Something we all
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Even in the courts, there was nothing that they could pin on me, really. That sounds like, but I could have been on the phone. I could
Mm.
have been speaking to my husband, and that would have changed everything. Every person's perception, every person's feeling. Friends,
Mm.
family, people in the village were amazing and so understanding. But if there'd been that little nugget,
Yeah.
that
Well, there were none. There were no aggravating factors that could have, gone against you to elevate, your sentence, and that obviously would have been reflected in the sentence that you would have been given. But there wasn't any of that. So there literally was nothing else that you could have done at the time to improve your manner of driving that you wouldn't necessarily do again. And that must be difficult for you to try and comprehend, because the causation element of it was just not. There were no aggravating factors that caused this that you could say, yeah, maybe your attention was temporarily taken away because you were on a phone call, or maybe it was because of something else that you were texting, or something that you shouldn't have been doing. But there wasn't any of that, and that's probably something that's incredibly hard to accept and just come to terms with.
but then you don't. So what like I go over and over again. What I remember. Listen, I remember everything. I remember the feeling of the driving. I remember, but I must, for to not read the road right. I was not, I was not focusing completely and utterly on the road. I couldn't have been.
Mm.
So that there was a reason, but yeah.
Yeah. Um, 18 months later, or 17 months later, you went through a trial, and you were advised to plead not guilty despite accepting what happened. That must have been emotionally complex for you. What was that process like for you?
So we went to court, I think, a year later, and this was the first time I'd ever been in a court room, and it was the first time that I got to see um, this lady's family and friends, and yeah, I didn't. I wanted to look at them, but I didn't feel that I had the right to look at them. I didn't want to. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to. Yeah, I didn't feel I had the right. I wanted to. I wanted to speak. I wanted to do all these things, and obviously, I told I can't, and I wouldn't have. Um, I was advised it was something to do with the Goodyear. So we were going. We were up beforehand that the barrister had asked the judge to read the the case, the notes and everything, and give us an example. If we pleaded guilty so the charge was dangerous driving. If we pleaded guilty to death by dangerous driving, what sentence would he give? And when he came in, he said that he hadn't read it, and it was wasting his time, and he would give me 5 years. And I knew then, I'd been told then, that if it was over whatever the amount would have been, then I needed to plead not guilty. But not guilty was the only thing, and the only thing I was saying. So I've got their family, and the only thing they're hearing me say is not guilty. That felt so wrong, because I wanted to explain to them that I was guilty. I genuinely didn't think that I was guilty of dangerous driving. I didn't. I believed at the time that dangerous driving was somebody that was being reckless, was drinking, was on drugs, was do all the things that I thought was dangerous driving, and I genuinely didn't think that was me. So I did believe that I wasn't pleading, but it felt so wrong at the time, because that's all I could say. I couldn't say any more. I wasn't allowed to say any more. And then that was it. That was in the January. And then I think then we went to court another time. And then the case, the 5 days, was in the June of 2020. Um, did you ask me how, or did I?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So just, obviously that process would have been so emotionally complex for you, and just going through that, because you're obviously someone who's never been in trouble before, going to a police station would, all of the, never mind a courtroom, and obviously being then the defendant, all of this would have been utterly alien to you. And just asking you what that whole process was like for you.
Completely alien. And it's that submissive word again, like like I was just like a naughty child, and like I wasn't, I wasn't me. And gosh, even thinking now of the smell of the courts, and the feeling of it, again, this is COVID time, so there was actually hardly anyone there. um and being both, I was in two different courts, and both were like I was in a glass box. And when we went to trial, everybody was upstairs, my family and her family, sat side by side, which is crazy for all of the families. Crazy for all the families. And I think so. The court, 5 days, and I think I don't I had cried, obviously, but I hadn't cried a lot in that 18 months leading up to it. I mean, when I cried, but for those 5 days, I just cried in this glass box the whole time, with the jury over to my, actually it was when they're all seated separately because of COVID. So it was yeah, so there was only so many of my family, etc., was upstairs, and then the jury were either side, all spread out. Again, I couldn't look at anyone. I didn't know where to look. I just cried and cried and cried. And the court was bizarre. We'd been asked to get character statements, so the whole of my side, my defense,
Yeah.
was about what a wonderful person I was. And in normal circumstances, if you're hearing letters that people are writing to you about you, wow, amazing. But during this trial, it was just made me feel disgusting. It just was knowing that her family were listening to all of this, and it was about me when it wasn't about me, it was about her. And it just felt ridiculous. And it was ridiculous, actually, because the jury are, I mean, I know this now, but the jury, it doesn't matter who the person I am. It doesn't even matter what happened and why that happened on the night. It doesn't matter that the road changed it. It's about them. It's about them. If my driving ability, you'll know the right words, but if it's just below or far below. So the jury had to decide whether it was just below competent or
Yeah.
far below competent. That's what they had to judge. That's hard for them as well.
Yeah.
So all this lovely stuff about me was just, it was awful. It was really awful. Um, it didn't matter, and I didn't want to hear it. Um, and it was just, yeah, I just felt disgusted by it. They played the interview as part of the defence. Um, I was, I was, I did get up and speak. Um, and I was questioned a lot on my knowing roads and road signs. That's what I was the prosecutor,
Prosecution. Yeah.
which actually I did know all the signs of the roads, but I was quite surprised, to be fair. But like I did know them. He kept questioning me because I talked about this dual carriageway, which I'd said right at the beginning. I know it's not a dual carriageway. I still don't know. I think I said to him, "Do you know what the name is?" And he didn't know what the name of the road
Yeah.
was either. And then I got an opportunity to say sorry to the family. I don't think I looked up. I don't think I could look up. I just said sorry. I just wanted to say sorry, and I just knew those words were so pathetic that, and that's all I said. I think I said more, but that's all I wanted. That's all I wanted to say. I wanted to be up there, and I wanted to apologise. But gosh, what a pathetic word! What a pathetic sentence! Like, I don't even know how you do that. There was a lot of going in and out of my box. The people, the guards that were in my box were all very lovely to me. Even everyone I met in the courts didn't. They all had their opinions. They didn't think that I was guilty of driving, dangerously driving, but I was, because that's the law. There was a lot of going in and out. I mean, my whole family were there. My husband's family were there. My heart was beating. We were on different floors to her family. And every time we went up, it was I didn't know. I couldn't face coming face to face with them, or I didn't want to put them in the position to be face to face with me. For 5 whole days, my gosh, my heart just beat the whole time, hard or crying, or I was just a limpet. I think I was just limp. I was just absolutely drained. Um, the ch- the children had gone away. Actually, my husband's parents weren't there. My children had been taken up in Yorkshire. They were out of it for the week. Um, I think the jury liberated. Is that the right word?
Deliberated.
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 Yeah,
Yeah.
deliberated, because they had to be unanimous. So there was lots of
Yeah.
ins and outs, and then going back in and thinking that was the decision, and then it was a question on something. So it was 5 days of just pure awfulness. Yeah. And then on the 5th day, going in, and the thing you see on TV where somebody stands up and they, and then they say guilty. And I think I just fell to the floor because I knew that meant that I would be going to prison.
Yeah.
I don't think they knew, or that wasn't part. That wasn't part of, that wasn't part of their decision whether I should or shouldn't go to prison. That wasn't,
Yeah.
you know, they would
Absolutely.
they were normal human beings being told what to do, and so yeah, I just broke to the floor, and then I came. Oh, then I had been told that they would ask to have a time so I could go home, tell my children, because my children knew nothing. My family, you know, friends knew.
Yeah.
The business, I had to sort the business, get the business looked after, get power attorney, all that kind of stuff. Um, but at that moment, I thought I was going there and then. And then the barrister then put in a plea, and we were given a month actually. So went home. Do you want me to talk? Yep.
Yeah,
So
sure.
yeah. So went home. I think we went home that night, or we might have gone straight up to Yorkshire, drove straight up to Yorkshire, stayed the weekend, very bizarre weekend, very bizarre weekend. You know, actually the kids didn't know anything, so lots of talking behind, whispering things
How
really.
how on earth do you even begin to, I can't even comprehend having that conversation with your children, and obviously with your children being so young as well, like they're not going to understand certain things, and how it's just such a really delicate conversation. But the overriding thing would be that trying to explain to them that your mum's not coming home for, a long time. In their eyes, it's a world, isn't it? A
Mm.
world away. How what was that like for you, having that conversation with your children?
Absolutely crapping myself having that conversation. So didn't say anything for the whole weekend. I remember us driving home, so that's, a good 4 hours in the car, knowing that we were going to have this conversation, you know, playing the games and singing in the car and doing all the normal stuff, but absolutely crapping myself. I didn't, obviously, my husband and I must have discussed what and how we were going to say it, but I can just remember, like I can't think of any other circumstance, but you know, when you've got to, say something so big. So when we got home, I can remember we were upstairs in our bedroom and we called my eldest in first. So she was 10. And I did the hugging. My husband did the talking. Gosh, I wish I could remember. There were some really interesting things that they asked, and I can't remember them now. I'll have to ask my husband. There's lots of things that I've forgotten that I've just pushed away, I think. But there was some interesting, like matter of fact questions. So I remember my daughter crying. My daughter remembers seeing her daddy cry for the very first time, and he doesn't cry, so he has quite a weird cry. So she remembers that she thought it was really funny. So although it was this worst thing, actually, as a child, they don't understand really. I think the weirdest thing was that, not that mummy was crying, but that daddy was doing some kind of weird breathing, crying thing. So then we got my youngest up, and we had been told that they would see me every week, because that's what we thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
It didn't happen like that because of COVID, but so it was lots of reassuring for that. So I mean, it was just the worst thing ever, but there was some crying, a family cry, a family hug. And then we just had a month then of trying to normalize it. I think we did. So their close friends knew, but I thought I was going to contain it. I remember saying, like, what 3 friends would you like me to have a conversation with their parents so that you've got some, someone that you can talk to during this time. And then I remember most of those parents I knew. Some I had to go and knock on the door, and I literally told them, I had to tell the story because I needed them to understand, and so that was all a bit bizarre. There was about 3 parents that I didn't know that well, that I went and knocked on the door to speak to them in the village. And I genuinely thought it was going to be all contained. And then I remember my son, I was working, running home and telling me that somebody had said that they'd seen it on Facebook. And I was, like, that was like a whoa. But I think it was on, it was on the news. And that had been come up on Facebook on, so I think so it wasn't a Facebook conversation, but even so all of a sudden there was more people that knew, but everyone was brilliant because, even the article on the news was, it is what it was. It wasn't, so anything different.
Yeah.
So, and then we had a month. We went on holiday, camping. I remember in a lot of rain. We normalized it. We talked about it a lot, and we normalized it as much as we possibly could with the children for them to understand. Again, not knowing what was going to happen really, not, personally, my husband and I really not knowing what was going to happen. I think at one point Matt rang the prison like it was a hotel to ask customer service what I had to bring, genuinely, like we couldn't find any information, like, what do I take? What can I not take? And I think he rang the prison, and the customer service wasn't very good. In fact, they do have a TripAdvisor rating, which is quite funny. Not very high. But
Oh gosh.
like doing things like that, that was just, and
Yeah.
then I think somebody knew somebody, and I remember having a conversation with this random person. It was a cousin of a cousin, and all she said to me was, make sure you get a room on your own because, it's that if they've got a kettle, they're, like, that was just whoa. And then somebody else that turns out they'd been to prison, 30 years before for 6 months. I mean, I knew no one. I knew nothing. I knew nothing. So that month was about normalizing it for the kids and just preparing for it, but thinking then we were going to see each other every week.
How do you think you were able to prepare yourself? I mean, I know you were saying you were trying to normalize it for the children, but was there anything that you did to actually prepare yourself, or was it at that time it was just all about the kids and your husband?
All about the kids, all about the family. Lots of visitors. We'd had the first lockdown, and I think we were in that in-betweeny bit at that point.
Yeah.
So lots of visitors, lots of, getting everyone's head around it. My poor mum and dad and my sister, but I was just grateful it was me and it wasn't them. I really was just grateful it was, and not my husband. Actually that's quite selfish, isn't it? I think, I couldn't, I knew that I would be okay. I knew that I could deal with it, but I couldn't imagine being the other side. And, my sister, my mum, like, it could happen to anyone. That's what I
Yeah.
just kept thinking. It could happen to anyone. So we could all be in this situation, and I just would never want that on anyone.
Yeah.
So how did I prepare? I had absolutely no idea what was going to happen. I couldn't prepare. It's the unknown. I couldn't prepare emotionally. I couldn't prepare, even kissing the children goodnight. I still couldn't imagine what it would feel like not kissing them every night, or going to bed, where you go and always go in when they're asleep and kiss them goodnight. I couldn't imagine. So I didn't have any emotion about it, actually. because it was the unknown. So I couldn't feel emotional about it. It was just the unknown.
Yeah. And then obviously the sentence came, and you received obviously a custodial sentence, and you went to prison. And COVID hit. What was that like then? So how long was it before you were able to see your family? Because before you went in, you were obviously told that you'd have family visits once a week, and you were preparing your children that they would see you once a week. But obviously, COVID restrictions came in again. How long was it before you actually saw your children and your family again?
So when I first went in, first of all, I couldn't speak to anyone. I think it was 5 days before I was able to speak to anyone, because you have to get your phone money and everything sorted and all that kind of stuff. So my husband knew, he had absolutely no idea what was happening the other end. He couldn't speak to anyone. So that was quite desperate times. In fact, naughtily, when anybody came in that I met later that came in, I got the number from them and got my husband involved, which I'm sure, he was used to me always getting him involved, to ring the other, family member to let them know they were okay, because that was hard for the family, the other
Yeah.
side. Um, I was I was told quite quickly that visits weren't happening. Um, I I there, I- so in the first 2 months, it was once a month. So I think it was about 4 weeks. Um, I think maybe at 2 weeks I was allowed a video call that was this prison purple something or other, which was quite interesting, because every time anyone moved, and my child was 6 years old or 7 years old at the time, so it caused it to close down for 30 seconds. So
Oh gosh.
that was that was not a good. That was, yeah. So that was the first time I saw them, and then it was a month in, and everything you see on the films, it wasn't like that. I think there was me and one other person in this big room. I remember the guard being very lovely to me. Um, I've only recently been told how my family felt about coming in the other side. It was horrible. And actually, if it had been normal times and they were able to come every week, I don't know if that would have happened anyway. So there were lots of things that felt awful because it was COVID, but actually it was so emotional. Emotional as well, because we weren't allowed to touch. So I've got a 7-year-old and a 11-year-old that are being told that they were going to come in and sit down, and we were apart from each other. We weren't allowed to touch. And I think I said I wrote diaries, and I was been reading them over this last week to try and remember so much. But in it, my son had said, we'll put both our hands on the table and pretend, there's energy running between us. And at some point, we'd had a conversation with this invisible piece of rope between us that, wouldn't separate us. So I think that we'd had that conversation beforehand. I'd spoken to them on the phone quite a bit. So yeah, and I think there were lots of women that had younger children that never saw their children, because how can you tell a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old that they can't come and touch their mummies? And at one point, Noah, I think, was rolling around on the floor because he just didn't know how to cope with it all, and he got told off. And he took his shoes off and he got told off. But it was all, yeah. So that was 1 month. And then a month later, we did it again. This time there was more people in there, and it was really hard to hear each other. Again, we were,
Yeah.
separated, and different people on, and they were not so nice. There was a lot of shouting at us, the families and things. And so I saw them in 8 weeks. So I was in closed prison for 8 weeks, and actually, I then went to open prison. which I thought was going to be different in terms of seeing them. A long, 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 long way from home. It was now a 4-hour journey from home. And then we went into, so it was Christmas. And I was at this point chair of the Women's Voice committee. And there was a conversation about, because nobody was seeing anybody at this point. And I was part of this committee, and I managed to convince them that, it would be a good idea for the women to, get some visits up for Christmas. And visits were organised for a Saturday and a Sunday, and myself and one other was on the first lot of people coming in. My family came in. I'll come back to that. But then Boris Johnson literally said we were going into lockdown, and all these poor mums, everything got cancelled.
Oh,
so
my gosh.
I was really lucky. It was in a different environment. It was in a much better environment. But again, we were round a round table, but we weren't allowed to touch. And I remember Molly going to the toilet. And I just thought, gosh, maybe I'll go to the toilet with her. Maybe I'll just go to the toilet with her and just hug her and, just hold her.
Yeah.
But I would have got in a lot of trouble. And obviously when you're in prison, you're all, you're in trouble. So, and Noah, our fingers were like this at one point. We knew what we were doing. Our fingers were just so near to each other. The children, they were brilliant. They were absolutely brilliant. They were phenomenal. And then I think we had an hour. And then they got in the car, and I just watched them go. And then I didn't see them then until the May.
Wow. So that was like Christmas time until May. That's like 5 months. Oh my gosh.
And then that was when Rottles started. So Rottles are, what does Rottles stand for? You can go out, you get leave, basically. You're
Right.
deemed
Okay.
not to be a risk.
Right. Okay.
And you get, good behavior, and I got to go out, and so my husband and children came, and we were going to a local park. I think we had about 3 or 4 hours. I think we weren't allowed to touch, to be seen to touch. And if they had arrived and we'd touched, I'd have been pulled away, and I wouldn't have been able to go with them. So we all got in the car next to each other, obviously, masks on at that time. We went a mile down the road, pulled into a car park, and then just had the biggest Whitwell cuddle. We're literally squeezing them, like clambering over. And my daughter was a teenager then, so she was probably hating it. But I did not stop kissing and hugging them, and probably snogging my husband a little bit as well. So
Yeah.
I just couldn't, so that, we had just had a beautiful, fabulous, lovely day.
Gosh, what a
Yeah.
long time coming that was as well, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
that was that obviously must have been, one of the hardest parts for you, is not having that physical contact and just barely having the visual contact with them, just in their presence as well. But trying to adapt to prison life. I know before you said it was like as if you had to be a bit of a chameleon, really. You just had to fit in, and you wanted to try and fit in with as many people as possible because you wanted to make your life in there as easy as possible, not upset or offend anyone. And so you did kind of adjust, yourself accordingly to get along with, most people in there. What was that like? Can you share some of what your daily life looked like for you in there, and how you
Exhausting.
survived?
Exhausting. It was like, you say, it was like a chameleon. It was like, you know, jazz hands. It was like I got on with everyone. I, whoever, whether they were someone who worked there or, you know, they had done horrific things, you know, like I made myself, I literally pulled my big pants up and I made myself speak to everybody. And I didn't fit into any category. And I think that helped me. I was, you know, I don't think people knew how to take me, because I didn't fit, you know, I was older. You know, I'd see these young girls and think, gosh, you're in this environment and you're so vulnerable. You know, I knew who I was. I was a woman. I knew who I was. You know, nobody was going to take me for a ride or so, but I was very aware. So it was exhausting. You are literally putting on a mask. And that was talking to the officers. That was, you know, taking everything that came at you, the way people spoke to you, because, you know, in that place, there is a lot of power struggles, you know, power. Not everybody. I had some wonderful
Mm.
people that looked after me, but there were a lot of people in there that were in there for power,
Mm.
and you just had to play it. It was just playing it. I played it, you know, like inside being upset by things or things that were being said to me to purposely try and wind me up. I just didn't let it. Um, so it was exhausting. I put a big wall up around me. You know, the fact that I didn't see my children that often could have broken me, but it was like I had a big wall. I did not let, I wouldn't let myself cry. There were occasions when I lost it and completely and utterly lost it for something unexpected. Um, but I put a wall up against around me. And actually, my daughter did the same. It turned out, did the same to get through. It took a
Mm.
long time to break that wall down, but I, seeing them, broke that wall. Walking away from that room or wherever I was able to see them and walking back and then having to deal with whatever came at you because you were dealing with people that you'd never been around, good or bad. I mean, it was really actually a very enriching and I'm going to say amazing and actually some beauty in it experience.
Mm.
But yeah, big wall. I wasn't, you know, and there were situations. My husband said to me, keep your head down. I'm not very good at that. I'm not very good at seeing unfairness. You know, if someone is being bullied or someone is being treated unfairly, I'm not very good at keeping my head down. There were a few times when I didn't quite tell him what I was getting involved in.
Yeah.
But again, it was this mask. I was able to involve myself because my pants were up here and I
Mm.
would go in to a situation and speak as if I had all the confidence in the world, knowing that I had to deal with something head on rather than it becoming something where I was then in any kind of danger. I didn't feel unsafe, actually,
Yeah.
really, at any point. Didn't I don't think I felt unsafe.
But even in, you know, an environment like that, that you know, obviously didn't never expected to find yourself in, you found purpose and you were advocating for women and you also helped to change how menopause was addressed by the prison doctors. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I think the minute I got in, and interestingly, reading my diaries and remembering these things, I had all the time in the world to make any difference I could. I was finding my purpose. So I think even at the beginning, I was putting together a welcome pack for the ladies that arrived in prison to tell them everything. And I think there probably were welcome packs, but I felt that I could give a better welcome pack.
Yeah.
So that was something I was working on right at the beginning. Recycling. Oh my gosh, I was passionate about that. There was no recycling. I was very passionate about that. Um, I when I went to open prison, we were a couple of weeks in isolation, um, where I got put with two people that came from the other prison with me. One of them um, was very struggled quite severely with her mental health. In fact, going back to the closed prison, I made friends with many people that I felt needed help. There were so many people that needed help and they weren't getting it. There were so many women that were in there that I always say their story didn't begin with their crime. So many women in there that felt safe in there rather than what they were dealing with outside. That being their safe environment.
That's bizarre,
So
trying to even comprehend that, really,
yeah,
isn't it? I mean, how somebody would feel safer in prison than outside. But
yeah.
unfortunately, yeah,
And getting a bed and
it
getting
happens.
food and all those,
Yeah.
those that was crazy. So these two people, I ended up looking after the one, and then when we went into the after quarantine went in, she was troubled. She became a he during the process.
Right.
I'm not even sure that was dealt with very well, and eventually he self-harmed and got sent back. There was lots of issues going on there, and I tried to do my best with that. I became part of the WI, getting annoyed at Christmas when the ladies were stealing bits from the crafts and realizing it wasn't actually the DI the WI. I went and reminding myself where it actually was, and getting annoyed that they weren't following the rules. I was the yeah, I was the chairperson to the voice committee, which was a really interesting. I thought, well, I've done it for Scouts, I can do it for this. Um, so in an all-female prison, there was a male doctor, and there was lots of women my age, and there was lots of women that were being diagnosed with depression and being given depression tablet
Antidepressants.
and thank you,
Yeah.
antidepressants, which outraged me. One person in particular that I had known for quite a while, and then she was this and then she was that, was clearly not, so it was clearly perimenopause or menopause. And yeah, so I did a lot of writing and I did a lot of speaking, and I did eventually, just getting them to hear me out. So and getting them to understand, what it was. So yeah, I can't remember completely what happened because it's all like forms. You can't speak to anyone, so there was a lot of forms going backwards and
Yeah.
forwards with my case. But it was agreed in the end that I had been listened to, and any women of a certain age that were coming forward, for them to understand that it probably wasn't depression, that it probably was they needed HRT. And at the time, so yeah.
So you really, you obviously made your time inside as purposeful as possible, which is, obviously a credit to you, and no doubt something that helped the time go that little bit quicker for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I mean, I worked on a farm. I mean, if anyone knows me, that's far from anything. That's more my sister. Honestly, she'd have loved to have been there. I was, mucking out horses and pigs and all the things that are far from what I do.
Yeah.
Um, I think I even wrote some instruction manual for that as well.
Wow.
So yes,
You've spoken as well about journaling. You journaled every day, and where during your time inside. What and you said that you journaled your experience for your children. What drove you to do that, and what you hope those words will one day mean to your children?
It was a funny mix. So you obviously don't want your children to go to prison. So when I'm away, I don't want to worry my children, but I also don't want to make it sound like it's a really fabulous place and somewhere they should one day go to. So that was quite hard. So obviously I didn't tell them everything. I gave them a version of the reality, but I thought I'd always written diaries when I was younger. Um, and I'd, travelled and done lots of things where I have lots and lots of diaries, but I hadn't done it for quite a while. So I wanted to write it in for it to be real, but a version, not so much, no swearing, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
in a version that my children could read one day, for them. And actually, it turns out to remind me, because so much of it I have forgotten. I think that's a way of surviving, isn't it? That's a way
Yeah, of
of
course.
coping with it. So yeah, so I think I said so. This week I have been, just because I knew that I was going to be speaking to you. I have been. I've got a box of letters that I've not yet tackled. A box of things, but the diaries, because they're for my children, they're quite light. So I have been reading them, and last night my son sat down with me and asked me what I was doing, and I said, "Oh, these are my diaries I wrote when I was away. Would you like to listen to a bit?" And it got quite emotional. It felt more emotional when I was reading it to him actually than I was reading it in my head, and because there's a lot of me obviously talking about how much I'm missing them, and how much I love them, and how much I love my husband. So, and Noah, my son, was apologetic for not remembering any of it, and I was, he was 7, and actually that's that I was saying to him, then that means we did a good job because we protected him from it all.
Mm.
He wasn't protected because, at one point, um he was hiding under tables at school. He wasn't interacting at school at all, so he doesn't remember any of that really, apart from the stories. So the fact that when I'm reading this to him and he's doesn't know it or doesn't remember it or doesn't, that's brilliant, isn't it? that's
Yeah.
that's I said to him, we did the right thing. So the diaries are for them one day to read the reality of it, you know um not for them to feel sad, but there's a big chunk of our family life that I'm not there.
Yeah.
So this will fill in any gaps if they've got any questions, because I guess, when I left, I thought I was going to change things. I was going to do things. I was very passionate about, people understanding what goes on in a female prison. I was very passionate about the statistics and all these things. But actually, I left and I got on with our lives, and I think I just pushed it all down.
Mm.
This is why this is a can of worms opening up again, and I feel it's the right time. But I don't know where I was going then. I was going off on a tangent. Sorry, I don't know where I was going then.
No, don't worry. Just obviously, then the time came finally when you were coming home, and after being away from your family and your children and your business for well over a year, you were finally reunited with them, and your life. Were there parts of your life that felt unfamiliar when you returned? Maybe things that had changed, or things inside you that no longer fitted the old life?
I think my main focus was getting my family back together. The whole way through all of this, I knew I was one of the lucky ones, in the fact that I knew I had waiting for me a family and a home. You know, that's not the norm. You know, it's not the norm for children to stay in the family home. I think it's the statistic was 99% of children get removed from their family home. I knew I had a home. I knew I had a safe home. But I knew that, you know, we'd been apart for 13 months and we needed to rekindle, and become normal again. So when I got home, I hadn't been told that my daughter had decided quite early on. She stopped hugging. She stopped giving cuddles. She stopped kissing. Her wall was so far up. Nobody had told me this. So my job was to break down those walls. My job was to, whether she liked it or not, was to cuddle her and kiss her. But even at night time, when I went into her bedroom and kissed her, even when she was asleep, she rolled away from me. And that, I was frightened to kiss my child because I was frightened of how much it hurt. You know, before going away, you know, all her life, I'd had 10 minutes in her bed and 10 minutes in my son's bed, you know, to this kind of, one day there'd be a teenager and I wanted us to have this connection, and all of a sudden all of that prep had gone out the window. So now to be in a situation where my daughter wouldn't, she didn't she didn't hug. She wouldn't hug. She would repel from any physical contact. And I think because I hadn't been told this, it was a real shock. And I think probably at the beginning I was just go ho. I was not allowing, you know, there was no consent. But actually, you know, I needed to consent and just warmly. So my whole being was about making it be normal, to being not consciously thinking about the words or thinking about the hugs or thinking about what we were doing, to be a mum again, to okay, it's really hard to remember, but everything was consciously doing everything. You were plonked back in the home. You know, so much of it you didn't know what had happened in that time. You know, like everyone had dealt with COVID. You know, they had dealt, at one point we'd got somebody, because my husband's job is huge, and he'd opened some sites, so he was away, but he used to drive home, even if it was 4 hours every single night, to put the children to bed, which he didn't need to do, but he knew that he had to do it. You know, we had grandparents there, and that in itself was just this awful, you know, older people in the house, you know, during COVID, and that was awful. At one point, we'd got somebody to come in and look after the children, but that didn't turn out well. I think she wanted them to be about 3 years old, and actually, my children were, I'd say, being horrible. My children were being horrible because that they were angry. They were so angry, you know, and Molly didn't want anyone to be in the family home, obviously. So they'd dealt with all that, but you know, I didn't see any of that, and I caused all that. And actually, she took it out on her daddy when I got home, even though everything was to do with me. She completely and utterly took it out on her daddy, and that was horrible to see. She's back now being a daddy's girl that she'd always been. So,
Oh,
you know,
bless.
life now is very normal. Life is very normal. You know, my business is gone in a different direction and got all that going. There's still a lot of trauma around all of that COVID stuff. We've moved to be near people that know what went on and to support us,
Yeah.
and to get the kids everywhere. And joke doesn't sound right, but you know, the children jokingly tell me how much they were traumatized by what I did to them. But you know,
It's probably more of a survival mechanism than anything,
yeah,
though, isn't it? You know,
yeah.
yeah. So looking back now, do you feel that you're the same woman who walked into prison, or has this experience changed your identity in any way?
It's all a bit confusing because I'm perimenopausal. So I'm very different anyway. So I don't
I
know.
can, I can, I can, I can, I can sympathize with you there and empathize as well because I think I'm going through the same. So yeah, we're like a Jekyll and Hyde. Just hello, what version of
Yeah,
Rachel have we got today? Let me see. Yeah.
absolutely. So I'm in fog quite a lot of the time.
Mm,
Um, I guess you're always a different version of yourself, you know, this path, this life we lead. You know, I learned so much about myself. You know, I'd never been tested before. I never, you know, I'd never my resilience and strength and all those things. I'd never been tested before.
mm,
So, am I a different person? I want to say I'm not, you know, like I actually want to say that I'm not, you know, that I want to be me again, and I think I am. Um, this time now, this opening can of worms, I think is a really good thing. Um, I feel that going away, I needed that punishment, um, to be able to process it all. I think I needed that. There were probably other ways I could have been, but that was the right way.
yeah.
Right, for me, I needed that because the minute that happened, I knew that one day this crappy wave that I was on would land on some, you know, land somewhere that we could, you know, get a new norm. So I've learnt so much.
Mm,
I don't talk about this stuff. I don't talk about, you know, normal life now, everything that happened. I don't go back to that night at all. So speaking to you was, I don't talk about that because, yeah, yeah, there's parts of it I don't think about or don't want to
mm,
think about. But, you know, life has moved on. The children are growing and they're, you know, we're in a new place. But I don't stop thinking about it. I don't stop thinking. I don't ever stop thinking about this lady that I don't know and a family that I don't know that I became part of. And, you know, I always think of this, you know, like a pebble, you know, that
that
one
ripple.
moment and
Yeah.
the
The ripple
people
effect.
involved from all around, including the police and the courts and the, you know, but the family and friends, you know, both sides, it's like this, you know, became this massive tsunami. But yeah, I don't, yeah.
Thank you. Lee, I just want to honour how you've shown up today, not to erase the pain of what happened, but to show that we can hold grief, accountability, and hope in the same breath. So thank you for sharing your story with us today and for being so honest, even though it was clearly still very painful for you. I'm very grateful for you. For those listening who've made mistakes that haunt them or who feel they don't deserve to move forward, what would you say to them?
I don't know. That, I guess I, I feel I've got to come out with some wise words that, because it depends.
I know there are so many different factors, aren't there, and
Depends.
circumstances. But
Yeah.
if somebody else was found themselves in the same situation as you, those similar circumstances, then what would you, what would you say to them?
Sorry, my battery was just about to go
That's
dead then.
okay.
Um, Ride the wave is a massive, awful wave, and you've got to go through it. You've got to ride it. It's part of your journey. Um, You've just got to ride it. It will be all right one day, of sorts. Whatever anyone's going through, it is like this massive, huge wave that you're in, aren't you? And it just takes time. I can't say, that you're ever going to get over, if it's my situation, what you did, in terms of, it's always going to be with you, and I feel that it should be with you. And that's not in a way, that's not in a you don't deserve to get on and have a life. You do, but that's part of your story, isn't it? It's part of your story. Whatever you've done or have done to you or whatever, that's part of your story. So it's with you. But gosh, we've got one life. That sounds awful, but whatever we are given, whatever that life is we are given, we have to honor it, and we have to make the most of it. And if I'm a mum, and I have to do right by my children, and to wallow in it is not the right thing to do. Is that? I don't know. It will one day, whether that's a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, you will ride that wave, and it will land somewhere okay.
Yeah, thank you. Lee, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Like I said, for sitting through the discomfort and for sharing your truth with vulnerability and with care. Your story is one of heartbreak, yes, but also of accountability, of motherhood, and the long, painful journey of rebuilding. To the woman who lost her life that day, we honour her, her memory, and the family who still carries that loss. And to every listener who's ever felt that they couldn't come back from something, let this be a reminder that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about integrating. If this episode moved you, please share it. These stories deserve to be heard. And if you want to continue exploring the emotions we often hide, subscribe, leave a review, and join us again next week. And remember, as always, there's strength in every step and courage in every story. Until next time.